Hello, welcome to the Year 2 Assessment Information session. My name's Ray Lee. I'm the head teacher at Hertford Infant School, and hopefully this short slideshow will tell you more about the Key Stage 1 SATs that your child will be taking in the next couple of months. Year 2 is an important year for all children. As teachers, we see great progress and the development of the whole child. We see their independence, their confidence, they're making links, and they're wanting to know more really come out. And during their time in Year 2, children are expected to make the greatest amount of progress. But of course, every child is different. Throughout the year, we assess the children as we have in other year groups, and any decisions that are made with regard to their progress or their attainment are based on our judgment. So how are we assessing? We use the pre-key stage standards 1 to 4. Mainly we look at level 4 when we are using them for pupils who are working below the National Curriculum Assessment Standard. We use these for reading, writing and maths. Pre-key stage standard 4 for reading. Please note that this is divided into word reading and language comprehension. And although the language comprehension only has 2 bullet points, it is quite a weighty area. Pre-key stage standards level 4 for writing, again divided into composition and transcription. Pre-key stage standards level 4 for maths. Note there are quite a lot of bullet points for the children to cover. You may want to stop the video and go back and look over the pre-key stage standards. Now, as I said, all children are different, so some children may be working towards the expected standard. This slide shows working towards the expected standard in reading. Working towards the expected standard in writing. Working towards the expected standard in maths. The next few slides show working at the expected standard for reading, writing and maths. This is based on expecting the children to know all the working towards the expected standard, as well as these bullet points. And please note, children have to demonstrate every bullet point. As I said in the previous slide, working at the expected standard, moderators who come in to look at the children's work alongside the teacher who is making the judgment will expect to see examples of every bullet point. Not always in the same piece of work though, so we may present a piece of work that shows a child can use common exception words independently, although we might show another piece of work where we're talking about how a child has used real events and written about them simply and clearly. Lots to do at working at the expected standard in maths, based on all the other bullet points in the previous maths slide, which was working towards the expected standard. Again, teachers need to be able to show to a moderator, if we were moderated, that the children can do all of those bullet points independently. As I've said previously, every child is different. So some children may be working at what we call greater depth within an expected standard. Now this might be for all core subjects, reading, writing and maths, or it might be just for one. Please note, although there are only 3 bullet points on this slide for reading, they are expected to demonstrate all the previous working at the expected standard bullet points. So quite a lot for a child to be able to show. This slide shows working at greater depth within the expected standard for writing. More bullet points than the previous slide with reading, but as I've said previously, you have to demonstrate all the other writing bullet points in the working at the expected standard. Within writing at greater depth, we will be looking for children to be using their reading skills to demonstrate flair in their writing. So whereby a child who has been reading a particular book may write in the style of that author. Quite a lot for a 7-year-old. And finally, a slide to show you working at greater depth within the expected standard for maths. As previously said, all the bullet points on this slide are extras to the bullet points that we read on the previous slide at working at expected standards for maths. Your child currently has 3 maths books, which show all of their work from September when they joined us in year 2. They also have jotters. The teachers will be always looking at the expected standards to make sure that they have given your child opportunities to match these bullet points. Now, for some children won't be ready for example, reading the time on the clock to the nearest 5 minutes. So there might not be in their books any work related to that. That's because they're still working at the expected standard, or maybe they're working at the working towards standard, or maybe they're working at the pre-key stage standards. Obviously, as teachers, we know your child very, very well. We are always going to challenge them, but we're also not going to give them work where we know that they won't feel comfortable and won't be able to achieve their very, very best. So these assessments, the tests that we take, they're called SATs. They're statutory. That means everybody, all children across the country will do them. They usually take place in the month of May. And as I said at the beginning, these are, they support our teacher judgment. They're not standalone assessments. So like if they don't do very well on the paper, that's it. It's not about that. It's about the children having a go with the little booklets. We don't call them SATs, we call them private work, we call them quizzes, challenges. The children quite enjoy it. They love having their little privacy board around them, and they have a little go at doing the booklets in the reading and in the maths, and then we use that work to supplement what we already think about your child when we're making judgments about them with their reading, writing and maths. So let's talk about the maths papers. There's 2 papers. Paper 1 is for arithmetic. It's worth about 25 marks and it covers calculation methods for all the operations. So adding, subtraction, division and multiplication. Now paper 2 covers problem solving. So that's where we're looking at reasoning and mathematical fluency. This paper is worth 35 marks. The questions are varied. They include multiple choice, matching, true or false, completing charts and tables, or drawing a shape. Some questions would also require the children to show their working out. And we've already been practicing these skills throughout the year, so the children are really prepared for these types of questions. So there's nothing unfamiliar. We encourage them to show their working by using a jotting or something called an empty number line. We can help the children to read the questions. So if your child is quite strong in maths but maybe not in reading, don't despair. Somebody will be alongside them. The only thing that we can't do is read out the actual numbers and symbols. But we know your child really, really well, so we will present them with the right work. So here are some examples from the arithmetic paper. You might want to pause the video and have a little look at them. So this is just a reminder of the TAFs, the Teacher Assessment Framework for working at the expected standard. So if we look at the second bullet point where it says partition any 2-digit numbers into different combinations of 10s and 1s, explaining their thinking verbally in pictures and using apparatus. The next slide will show you the sort of work that your children have been doing in order to achieve this TAF. So here we go. The children here have been using Dean's, a whiteboard and a whiteboard pen, and they have been making different 2-digit numbers and partitioning them. I'm sure you've probably seen this sort of work in our remote learning videos, or maybe you have watched Mrs. Smith's arithmetic videos that are on our website, and you might have seen them with a slide on tapestry where children have already done this sort of work. So just a reminder of the tasks for working at the expected standard in writing. Golly gosh, there's quite a lot there, isn't there? And there may be some words there that you might not know. So things like coordination, using the words of or and but, and subordination, using words like when, if, that, and because to join 2 clauses. Now, I'm not going to give you a lesson on that, but just you need to trust me, we have spoken to the children a lot about this and taught them. Now I'm going to show you on the next couple of slides some working at the expected standard type of writing. This is the sort of thing where you can see in the piece of writing the children using coordination and subordination. They're spelling common exception words correctly. They're using their capital letters of the correct size. There's spacing between the words, and basically the work is quite coherent, and it's all about those tenses, using them appropriately. So this is a piece of writing that would be judged at the expected standard. You can see that the handwriting is very uniform. They've used common exception words in there. They've used conjunctions in there. So they have used their punctuation. Actually, I've got exclamation marks in there as well, which is good. I'll let you just read through that. Hopefully, once you've read through it, you'll notice the punctuation, as I've said, for statements and exclamation, it's coherent and the spelling is good. And most importantly, it flows. Children will be expected to write with stamina, so longer pieces of writing. As I've said, use a range of punctuation in the appropriate places. So if there is the opportunity to use the question mark, then the children will be expected to. We encourage the children to use noun phrases, to use adjectives to make their writing more exciting, and then capital letters, especially for proper nouns as well. And we would ask them to draw upon their reading to support their writing. Now, this is something that we teach over and over in English lessons. So the next piece of work is an example of a child writing at greater depth. So they have shown that they can meet all the tasks for the working at age-related expectations, and now this is for greater depth. Here we go. Okay, so here we go. This piece of writing is a piece of work that would be judged by teachers at working at the greater depth. The writing has been put into paragraphs, something that we do touch on in our teaching, but is not an expectation for children in year 2. To me, that demonstrates that the child notices in their reading of books, like chapter books, that stories are written with paragraphs. There's speech marks in there, again, something that we don't teach at year 2 for them to make the expected standard, but we will talk about that, and the child obviously is drawing upon their reading again. Lots of uses of the tenses in the correct sense, as in they're talking about the past tense and they're using ed appropriately, which is a suffix. Some really lovely sentence starters in there. So for instance, once upon a time, obviously the next morning, slowly Poppy lifted her head, really, really lovely. Use of ellipses. So on the second page, the child has written up, up, up. Really, really good. So it's really engaging the reader as you read this piece of work. Good spelling, as I've said. Handwriting is stylized, and yeah, a really good piece of work. Well done then. So the reading test, again, like the maths, consists of 2 separate papers. There's paper 1, which contains a selection of text with questions about the text directly underneath each section. So the child reads a paragraph or a few statements, and then has to answer something about that piece of text that they've just read. And the second paper contains a reading booklet, and that has a selection of paragraphs and passages about different in different styles. So there might be a non-fiction and a fiction piece, and the children write their answers to the questions about the pieces that they've read in a separate booklet. Each paper is worth 50% of the marks, and the children are not being assessed at working at speed, so it won't be strictly timed. We give to children breaks in between. The text will cover poetry, fiction and non-fiction, which we've talked about with the children over the last 3 years while they've been with us. And the questions are designed to assess the comprehension and understanding of a child's reading. So if there's anything that you can do, just keep asking your child questions about what they've read, and don't just stick to the retrieval questions. So like, you know, what does the boy do? What does the boy look like? What is the dog doing? That sort of thing. Try to ask some of those questions about inference. So why do you think the author said that the boy was whispering, and seeing as the children can see that sometimes the author uses words to ensure that we understand what's actually going on in the story. Some of the questions are multiple choice or selected responses, and others require a short answer. And maybe they might be looking for something particular in the answer, so they might have to draw from what they've actually read and put that into the answer. Okay. Again, we'll prepare the children. They won't go cold into this. They will have seen these types of questions in their guided reading sessions. Now, something the tests won't do, but we have to do as teachers, is to listen to your child read and look at their fluency. So the two YouTube videos that we've got here, I'm going to post in the email that I've sent you. You can look at those and you can see how a fluent reader should sound like at the expected standard. Typically 90 words a minute, and obviously we don't sit there with timers, but you as teachers, you know if your child is fluent a reader. So that means they're not decoding every word. They'll be able to recognize our common exception words. They are using their phonics appropriately, and if obviously they come across an unknown word, then they might decode it and then they'll read it back to themselves and they actually understand what they're reading. Now, if you go to this link, you'll be able to see some of the practice materials that we've been using in school, and you can use them at home if you want to. Now, you might decide, oh, I don't want to look at those papers with my child. Completely understand that, but there are other ways that you can help support your child at home. So getting your child into a good routine. Now we're coming into the warmer months, fingers crossed, and people will have barbecues and maybe staying up late to watch football and different programs on the television. Please, please, please try to get your child into a routine of an early night, good night's sleep, and a really good breakfast. Obviously we'll give them a bagel in school, but having a good breakfast with some juice in the mornings is going to give them a great start. And obviously coming to school, one of the biggest challenges for us as teachers is when we try to moderate a child's piece of work is opening up the book, and when we go, in February the child did X, and you open up the book and actually there's no work there because they weren't here. Now obviously it's going to be really tricky this year because some children have been away because of COVID. That is across the country, so there are going to be gaps. Quite how moderators are going to get around that, I don't know. We're learning all the time and getting information from the DfE, but that is one of our problems. So if your child is in school, that's fabulous, because as I've said, all the work builds up. So we'll do a piece of work on Monday, and then we'll relook at it and edit it on the Tuesday, and on the Wednesday we might present that piece of work and write it out again. Equally, on another day we might be looking at subtraction, and then the next day we're looking at subtraction and addition and how they link together. So being in school ensures that your child can get the very best from the teachers and know everything they need to know. So at Hertford Infant School, we try to keep everything as normal as possible, okay? So we don't use the terminology SATs, okay? We talk about private work. We're going to do a few little quizzes here. They're carried out in our classrooms, and they're carried out with teachers that they know. Sometimes we have used other parts of our school where it's a bit quieter, maybe a smaller group, but again, it'll be a place where the children are familiar with. As I've said, the children have had the opportunity to look at some of the old tests and see them, and they love the challenge. They quite like it. It's a little bit different. And when we do our writing, they're used to planning it out, writing it, making mistakes, editing it, and then writing it out neatly. So we make sure that there's lots of breaks, so that the children aren't just sitting there for a long period of time. And then when the children come back after their break, they feel confident and they carry on. Sometimes we have a little snack just to make it a little bit different. And it's not a stressful time. So hopefully you've seen now what the expectations are. You've found out that at Hertford Infant School, we don't call them SATs. Please don't call them SATs. But it will take place in May sort of time. The children will be in school as normal uniform, everything's like the same. Maybe a biscuit or two might be a little bit different. And it's actually a positive time. It's a way for us as teachers to justify that, yeah, we know your child really, really well. We presented them with the right work, and they've risen to the challenge. If you have any questions or I haven't answered things, I know that obviously I've been doing SATs for many, many years. I might just take it that everybody understands it. Don't think, oh, my question's really silly. Please don't. Just come into school, find me on the playground, drop us an email, and we'll answer it. I mean, it would be much better if we could have done this in person, but obviously with everything that's going on at the moment, we're trying to keep all our teachers safe. So please ask questions. We're here, and we will answer them as best we can. Thank you for listening.